Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking on a true heavyweight of modern business. The career and really the monumental impact of Satya Nadella, who is only the third chief executive officer in Microsoft's entire history.
That's right.
And we're not just here to recite a corporate biography. We are going to try and dissect one of the most successful, maybe the most successful, corporate transformations of the 21st century.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to frame it. The source material we've synthesized for you provides this really comprehensive look at his whole journey. You can trace his path from his upbringing in India all the way to his tenure at the top of a company now valued in the trillions.
Trillions. It's just a staggering number.
It is. And so our mission today is to move beyond just the timeline and really understand the mechanism of that change. We want to pinpoint the precise, strategic, the technical, and maybe most surprisingly, the cultural decisions he engineered. Because those are the things that catalyzed a decade of just phenomenal financial and, operational growth.
And before we get into the how, let's really nail down the what. Because for you, the learner, who appreciates the bottom line, this is the number that matters. We're talking about a leader under whose direction Microsoft stock grew nearly tenfold. Between 2014, when he took over, and November 2023. And this is the critical context. The growth didn't just follow a period of steady success. It completely ended a 14-year stretch where Microsoft's stock growth was essentially flat, near zero.
Right. It was dead money for over a decade. And that kind of turnaround, which represents an astonishing 27% annual growth rate, compounded over a decade, that is the definition of a corporate resurrection.
It really is.
It suggests that Nadella successfully solved a really deep existential crisis for the company. He navigated Microsoft out of its decade-long identity and relevance problem.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's figure out exactly how a blend of technical mastery and deep empathy became the engine for all this success.
Let's do it.
We begin, as we must, at the start. Part 1, the foundations that shaped this leader, his early life, and his very, very deliberately multidisciplinary education.
Nadella's background, it just speaks directly to a disciplined, high-achievement environment. He was born Satya Narayana Nadella on August 19th, 1967, in Hyderabad, Telangana, in India.
And his family roots, they just set an incredibly high bar for intellectual rigor and also public service.
Absolutely. His father, Bukapuram Nadella Yugandhar, was a distinguished officer of the Indian Administrative Service, the IAS. He was part of the prestigious 1962 batch.
And for our global listeners, we should probably explain what the IAS is. It's a huge deal.
Oh, it's a huge deal. It's India's premier civil service. It's arguably the most competitive and demanding public service position in the entire country. So what that signals is an upbringing just immersed in complexity, in high-level administration, and, intellectual discipline.
And what's fascinating is the contrast, too, because while his father was navigating the intricacies of state administration, his mother, Pravavati, she was a Sanskrit lecturer. So you have this incredible blend of high-level modern governance with, classical education, language, and tradition. It creates this complete intellectual environment right there at home, valuing both the technical and the humanistic.
And there's this wonderful geographical thread in the sources as well, which details his ancestry. His father, Yugandhar, he hailed from Bukapuram in the Anantapur district of Andhra Pradesh.
Okay.
And we learn that his grandfather had actually migrated there from a place called Nadella village, which is now in the Palnadu district.
So that's not just trivia, is it?
No, not at all. It emphasizes these deep, long-standing connections to the region. It gives him this grounded, traditional base from which he could then launch this incredible global career.
That strong foundation then paved the way for an academic journey that when you look back on it, it looks almost perfectly engineered to run a complex 21st century tech company.
It really does. He started locally, attending the Hyderabad public school, Begumpet, in India. And here's a fantastic piece of trivia that just speaks volumes about the school's impact. This very same institution produced the CEOs of both Adobe and MasterCard.
No way. Really? The same school?
The same school. It's like this powerful pipeline of global tech and finance leadership, all coming from one place.
If you're looking for a common denominator in success, that's a pretty good place to start.
It truly is. So after his initial schooling, he focused on building his core technical expertise. He received a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the Manipal Institute of Technology in Karnataka in 1988.
And electrical engineering, that's the foundation, right?
Yeah.
Hardware, systems, logic, the physical backbone of all computing.
Exactly. But the journey didn't end there with a bachelor's degree. He made the pivotal decision to move to the United States for advanced study, earning an MS in computer science from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in 1990.
Right.
And this is where that layered preparation really starts to take shape. He now had not only the hardware knowledge from electrical engineering, but also that deep understanding of software, algorithms, data structures from computer science.
But a company the size of Microsoft, facing these existential competitive threats, it needs so much more than just brilliant engineering.
Way more. It needs market timing, complex capital allocation, strategic pivots. You need the business side.
Which is precisely why he capped his whole educational journey with an MBA from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business in 1997.
And we just can't overstate the significance of this trifecta EECS in an MBA. It's so rare.
Yeah.
Many tech leaders are either visionary founders who kind of learn business by doing, or they're pure business administrators who have to rely on other people for technical guidance. Nadella was the rare combination, a true technical master who also achieved mastery in strategic business knowledge.
So when he eventually got the top job, he could speak all the languages.
All of them. He was facing this complex challenge of transitioning Microsoft's multi-billion-dollar business model from, selling software in boxes to selling cloud services like a utility. And this unique blend made him uniquely qualified to speak the language of engineering, finance, and strategy all at the same time.
That sets the stage perfectly for his professional ascent, which brings us to part 2. The ascent at Microsoft and engineering the cloud pivot. But first, there was a brief detour.
That's right. Before he joined Microsoft in 1992, Nadella worked for a little while at Sun Microsystems as a member of its technology staff.
And that's interesting because Sun was a big competitor in some ways.
A huge one. And this gave him valuable early insight into the Unix world and the whole open source ecosystem, which would later inform his collaborative strategy at Microsoft. It got him out of that, that internal competitive bubble of Redmond.
He then spent 22 years, 1992, all the way through 2014, climbing the ranks inside Microsoft. And when you look at his progression, what really stands out is just the sheer diversity of his roles. He wasn't siloed. He was accumulating this cross-functional experience that's so crucial for a future CEO.
Yeah, his progression, it reads like a roadmap for gaining a complete 360-degree view of the company's entire infrastructure and its monetization strategies. He served as vice president of the Microsoft Business Division,
Which gave him intimate knowledge of the core Office productivity suite and all those enterprise sales channels.
Exactly. But he also tackled the early and, let's be honest, often troubled frontier of web services. He was the Senior Vice President of R&D for the Online Services Division from March 2007 to February 2011.
And that was a tough time for them.
Oh, a particularly challenging time. They were really struggling to find their footing against Google and all these other digital native companies. So being in R&D for online services during that period meant he experienced failure and difficult pivots firsthand.
Which probably built his appreciation for risk and rapid learning.
It had to have. And let's not forget his time as corporate vice president of business solutions and the search and advertising platform group. That put him right in the thick of understanding monetization, the crucial advertising revenue model, and the enterprise solutions that really kept the company solvent.
So he saw it all.
He understood the company's strengths, the enterprise business, he understood its struggles online services, and he understood its foundational technical debt. But his most critical pre-CEO role, the one that proved he had the capacity to engineer a global turnaround, was as president of the Server and Tools Division from 2011 to 2014.
Right, and that division was massive. It was a substantial $19 billion business unit at the time. The transition he spearheaded there basically became the blueprint for the entire corporation.
This is the legendary cloud pivot we hear so much about, but he executed it initially just within this one division. Historically, the Server and Tools Division operated on a CapEx model, meaning customers would buy a physical software license like Windows Server or SQL database, and they'd install it on their own hardware. It was a massive, infrequent, cyclical sale.
So he had to fundamentally reverse that model. He had to shift from selling product licenses to selling services. That is a huge internal transformation. It's way more complex than just a simple price change.
Oh, it required a complete cultural, technical, and financial reorientation of the entire division. He led this shift toward cloud infrastructure and services, transitioning revenue from CapEx, or capital expenditure, to an OpEx, operational expenditure subscription model,
Which is Azure.
which is Azure. And this meant his engineering teams had to learn how to deliver software as a constantly updated utility, not as a static product. It changed everything from development cycles to deployment methods.
Wait, let's just pause on how difficult that is. Moving core products like Windows Server and Microsoft's database tools onto Azure. It means they weren't just running software anymore. They were running a global utility-scale data center business that had to be reliable 24/7. How did he prove that concept could even scale?
Well, the sources credit him with successfully migrating these core offerings, the developer tools, the database, Windows Server, onto the nascent Azure cloud platform. And this migration wasn't just technical. It required convincing these large conservative enterprise clients to trust Microsoft to host their mission-critical data in the cloud instead of keeping it safely on-site in their own server rooms.
A huge leap of faith for them. And the success wasn't just theoretical. We have the hard data, right?
Hmm.
Revenue from cloud services grew significantly under his leadership in that role. It showed it worked both operationally and in the market.
Precisely. The division's revenue jumped from $16.6 billion when he took over in 2011 to $20.3 billion by June of 2013. That tangible success, proving he could execute a cultural and technical shift at scale within a multi-billion-dollar division, it made him the undeniable choice for CEO. He had already solved the central strategic problem the company was facing, just on a smaller, though still massive, scale.
He had the blueprint. He had the track record.
Yeah.
And that brings us to part 3, the CEO era, the time of the great cultural reset and strategic alliance building.
And the transition happened pretty quickly. On February 4th, 2014, Nadella was announced as the CEO, succeeding Steve Ballmer. He became only the third CEO in the company's history. And then later, in 2021, he further cemented his control by assuming the title of chairman of Microsoft, succeeding John W. Thompson. This gave him the ultimate authority to drive both strategy and governance.
But as you pointed out, his tenure didn't exactly start flawlessly. In fact, one of his earliest public appearances as CEO resulted in a PR disaster, and yet in a surprising turn. It became the exact catalyst for the cultural philosophy he would champion.
Yeah, we're referring to the controversy from October 2014. He was at a Women in Computing event, and when he was asked for advice about gender pay gaps, Nadella advised women to rely on karma, and not to proactively ask for a raise, but instead to trust the system to recognize and reward their work.
Which, given the well-documented reality of systemic pay inequity, was immediately met with just outrage and fierce criticism. It was seen as totally tone-deaf and dismissive, especially for a leader who is supposed to be ushering in this new era of corporate consciousness.
It was a crucial, defining moment, but what matters is the immediate and complete reversal. He didn't defend himself. He didn't try to spin the quote. He apologized almost instantly on Twitter, acknowledging he was inarticulate, raid how women should ask for raise, and then he sent this candid, powerful email to all Microsoft employees, admitting he was, quote, completely wrong.
And that moment, that public institutionalized willingness to admit error and learn from it, that's what analysts point to as the precise moment the growth mindset culture was born at Microsoft. He didn't just apologize. He internalized the feedback and used it to redefine the company's very identity.
Exactly. The company, which had been characterized for years by this know-it-all attitude, often linked to its historical market dominance, was now being mandated by its leader to become a learn-it-all organization. The shift was immediate, and it was philosophical.
Following this very personal turning point, Nadella immediately revised Microsoft's mission statement. He shifted the philosophical North Star away from internal dominance and toward external impact.
Yes, and the new mission statement became incredibly influential. It was, empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more.
That emphasis on empower and achieve more is just a fundamental break from the past, which so often focused on dominating operating systems or winning market share. It's outward-facing, it's customer-centric.
And this wasn't just some corporate jargon on a poster. He orchestrated a profound internal cultural shift based on 3 core, mutually reinforcing values: empathy, collaboration, and the growth mindset. Empathy, as we'll see, was driven by his personal life and became foundational. Collaboration was necessary to make Azure ubiquitous. And the growth mindset was the engine that made learning and adapting mandatory for every single employee.
But how did this abstract concept of a growth mindset actually translate into measurable day-to-day internal change for, hundreds of thousands of employees? That's the strategic nugget our learner audience is really looking for.
Well, it started with a crucial change to performance reviews. Under the previous regime, performance was often ranked, comparatively, the old stack ranking system.
Right, which forced internal competition. It fostered that know-it-all culture.
Exactly. Nadella mandated a change to reward continuous improvement, learning from mistakes, and collaboration. It shifted the metric from individual technical brilliance to team-wide impact and the ability to adapt.
So he essentially dismantled the internal gladiatorial culture that had defined Microsoft for decades.
He did. And this internal philosophical change immediately enabled the external strategic shift. That collaboration mandate allowed Nadella to implement what was arguably the most visible and shocking strategic reversal of his entire tenure, emphasizing alliance and partnership, even with historical enemies.
This is where we see that new culture fully baked into the business strategy. For years, Microsoft operated under the philosophy that if it wasn't invented here, it had to be defeated. Nadella just threw that rulebook away.
And the scale of the new alliances is just staggering when you view it through the lens of Microsoft's history. They forged significant, deep partnerships with Apple Inc., Salesforce, IBM, and Dropbox. This meant Office and Azure services had to work flawlessly on Apple devices and integrate seamlessly with Salesforce's CRM systems platforms that Microsoft used to actively try to undermine.
It was an acknowledgement that the world was multi-platform and that trying to lock customers into the Windows ecosystem, it was a losing battle in the cloud age. Ubiquity became the new dominance.
But the ultimate act of corporate repentance, the move that truly signaled this new identity, was his stance on the open source community, specifically Linux.
A decade prior, Microsoft's CEO had famously declared Linux a cancer.
A cancer. And under Nadella, the company officially proclaimed Microsoft Seg Linux with the heart emoji.
Which must have just shocked everyone.
Oh, that emoji wasn't just lip service. The sources highlight that in 2016, Microsoft became a platinum member of the Linux Foundation. This move was absolutely essential for Azure's success. Most cloud workloads run on Linux. If Microsoft continued fighting Linux, they couldn't compete with Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud. By embracing open source and contributing to it, Nadella brought the entire developer community, which heavily favored Linux, into the Microsoft tent, and in doing so, secured Azure's future.
That is a fascinating synthesis. A personal stumble forces a cultural shift, which enables a strategic pivot toward collaboration, which ultimately secures the massive financial engine of Azure.
The strategy and the culture are just inseparable under Nadella's leadership. The growth mindset allowed them to admit that proprietary lock-in was a mistake, and empathy allowed them to understand that developers needed open tools and cross-platform compatibility.
Now let's move to part 4, financial strategy and acquisitions. This is where we see that strategic shift translate directly into capital allocation, how we spent big money to reinforce the cloud platform.
Right. Nadella's acquisition strategy was focused less on simple revenue grabs and more on acquiring talent, networks, and crucial ecosystems that would feed the Azure and Office 365 platforms. He was buying the future developer and enterprise pipeline.
Okay, so let's start with his earliest big acquisition in 2014, Mojang, the Swedish company known for the block-building game Minecraft. That purchase cost $2.5 billion. Why was a game company so important to an enterprise cloud leader?
It seemed strange at the time, but Minecraft was crucial for two big reasons. First, consumer relevance. It gave Microsoft a tremendously popular cross-platform intellectual property that engaged millions of young users. It diversified the portfolio beyond boring enterprise meetings.
Yeah.
Second, and maybe more subtly, it taught Microsoft how to manage a highly active, creative, and cross-platform community. That was invaluable experience for managing the developer community they needed around Azure. And he also oversaw the purchase of Xamarin, which was a key developer tool for cross-platform mobile app creation.
Then came the foundational pillars for the professional ecosystem.
Exactly. In 2016, he pulled off the massive purchase of the professional social network LinkedIn for $26.2 billion. This was a direct foundational move to integrate professional identity right into the Microsoft stack.
Let's clarify why this was so important for you, the learner. You mentioned it boosted Dynamics 365. Can you elaborate on that connection?
Certainly. So Dynamics 365 is Microsoft's integrated suite of business applications. It's their CRM and ERP tools, their direct competitor to Salesforce. By acquiring LinkedIn, Microsoft could link professional identities, sales prospects, and talent acquisition directly into those CRM tools. So a salesperson using Dynamics 365 could instantly see a prospect's full LinkedIn profile, their professional network, their history. It made the sales and recruitment tools far more powerful and connected than their competitors. It was a fusion of professional data and enterprise software.
That makes perfect sense. He didn't just buy a social network, he bought the professional data layer for their entire enterprise software suite. And following that, he reinforced the commitment to the developer community again with GitHub.
Yes, in 2018, Microsoft acquired GitHub, the software collaboration platform, for $7.5 billion. If LinkedIn gave them the professional network, GitHub gave them the creative engine of global software development.
The place where everyone builds code.
Everyone. By acquiring the platform where the world's open source code is built and stored, Microsoft essentially guaranteed relevance to every current and future developer. It strengthened Azure by making sure Azure's tools were deeply integrated into the world's most popular coding platform.
So we have the cultural shift enabling the cloud pivot, and then the acquisition solidifying the resulting platform strategy. And the market response, as we noted at the top, was just stunning. We have to reiterate the financial turnaround. A nearly tenfold stock increase between 2014 and 2023.
And that success isn't just attributed to the cloud, though Azure is certainly the core driver. It's attributed to the execution of the cloud strategy, which was only possible because of the cultural shifts we've been talking about. The market was rewarding not just the idea, but the successful dismantling of all those internal obstacles.
And we can see this reflected in his compensation structure, which is fascinating for anyone interested in high-level business metrics. While the numbers fluctuate, we see a clear alignment between the value he created and his reward.
Absolutely. His pay reflects both the complexity of the role and the phenomenal shareholder return. Looking at the data, his 2016 pay was $84.5 million. And while his 2023 pay was $48.5 million, his 2024 pay spiked dramatically to $79.1 million.
That's a 63% increase over the prior year. That's noteworthy. The sources point out this major spike was primarily driven by stock awards. So what does that tell us about the company's view of his long-term success?
It tells us the compensation structure is heavily weighted toward long-term incentives based on performance metrics that span multiple years. When the stock award portion jumps like that, it signifies that Nadella didn't just meet his short-term targets. He smashed multi-year goals tied directly to market performance, revenue growth in strategic areas like Azure, and sustained total shareholder return.
So it's a reward for sustained performance.
Exactly. The massive reward confirms the market's belief that his strategy continues to create exponential long-term value.
And that level of financial success naturally led to extensive external recognition.
His accolades are truly global, cementing his status beyond just the tech sphere. He was honored as a Time 100 honoree twice, in 2018 and again in 2024. In 2019, he just swept the major business awards. He was named both the Financial Times Person of the Year and Fortune Magazine Business Person of the Year. He was also recognized back in India as the Global Indian Business Icon by CNBC TV 18 in 2020.
And that recognition from India, it really reflects the pride his home country takes in his global achievements.
It certainly does. He received the Pravasi Bharatiya Samman in 2015, which is awarded to distinguished overseas Indians, and that was followed by the Padma Bhushan in 2022, which is India's third highest civilian award.
And finally, acknowledging his technical and academic contributions, he was awarded an honorary PhD from the Georgia Institute of Technology in January 2024. This just confirms his influence reaches far beyond the boundaries of Redmond and Wall Street.
Yeah, it's clear that the strategic and financial achievements are monumental, but to truly understand why he anchored his corporate transformation in empathy and continual learning, we need to dive deeper into his personal life. And this brings us to part 5, the personal life empathy, cricket, and philanthropy.
His personal story is incredibly moving and is profoundly linked to his professional philosophy. He married Anupama Priyadarshini in 1992, which was the same year he joined Microsoft.
And tying back to his family history, the sources mention Anupama was his junior studying architecture at Manipal, and she is the daughter of his father's IAS batchmate.
Wow.
It just reinforces that background of rigorous, high-achieving, disciplined families that shaped his early life.
The couple went on to have 3 children, 2 daughters and a son, Zain. And it is the story of his son that really became the emotional core of his leadership philosophy.
Zain was born with cerebral palsy. He was a legally blind quadriplegic, and he tragically died in February 2022 at the age of 26.
According to Nadella himself, becoming the father of a child with special needs was not just a personal challenge. It was a fundamental turning point that completely reshaped his entire worldview.
It transformed his understanding of empowerment. He realized that building technology that was accessible to everyone wasn't a side project or, a regulatory compliance item. It was a moral imperative and, critically, a driver of universal innovation.
Right.
The struggle he and his wife faced in finding accessible tools for Zain directly informed Microsoft's vision around accessibility, and most importantly, it baked empathy right into the center of the company's culture.
That makes the mission statement, empower every person, so much more authentic. It wasn't just a marketing line, it was a deeply personal reflection of his life's hardest lesson.
And it turned empathy from a soft skill into a crucial driver of design. If you design a product to meet the needs of the most challenged users, the resulting innovation often benefits everyone. For instance, features designed for blind users often improve overall usability for all users in low light or distracting environments. He institutionalized the belief that empathy is a requirement for great product development.
Shifting gears just slightly, we also see his background influencing his leadership style through his hobbies. He's noted as an avid reader of American and Indian poetry, which suggests a reflective, thoughtful side. But it's his passion for cricket that he explicitly credits with improving his leadership skills.
Yes, he was a keen cricket player on his school team. And when you look at cricket, particularly Test cricket, it's a sport that requires immense patience, long-term strategic planning, and the ability to adapt to radically shifting conditions like a sudden rain delay or a deteriorating pitch.
So how does that translate directly to running a multinational tech giant?
Well, contrast it with a sport like basketball or American football, which is defined by short, explosive drives. Cricket is about long innings. You have to play defense, maintaining the core windows and office cash cows, while simultaneously planning a strategic counterattack, that aggressive long-term investment in Azure.
A great analogy.
It taught him that running a company is about building sustainable partnerships and pacing yourself for multi-year success, not just quarterly wins. It teaches you how to maintain focus when conditions are hostile or slow.
And his love for the game extends to investment, which demonstrates a commitment to his community and his own interests.
It does. He and his wife are part of the ownership group for the Major League Soccer club, Seattle Sounders FC, linking him to the Pacific Northwest community. And he's reinforced his commitment to his passion by purchasing the Seattle Orcas cricket team, which participates in the Major League Cricket season that started in 2023.
He also encapsulated his entire philosophy in a book, demonstrating his dedication to sharing the lessons learned from this incredible transformation.
In 2017, he published Hit Refresh, the quest to rediscover Microsoft's soul and imagine a better future for everyone. The title itself is just a perfect metaphor for his tenure, realizing the company needed a fundamental reset, not just a superficial update. The book details his life, his learning curve, and the transformation he engineered at Microsoft.
And showing a commitment to his mission statement that goes beyond the corporate bottom line, he announced that all the profits from the book would go directly to Microsoft philanthropies to support nonprofit organizations globally. Just closes the loop on that empathy and empowerment theme.
And finally, we circle back to his high honors from India, the Pravasi Bharatya Samman in 2015 and the Padma Bhushan in 2022, which recognize him not just as a successful businessman, but as an influential leader of Indian origin who brought a global perspective to one of the world's most dominant companies.
So if we look back at this complex 22-year journey that culminated in this spectacular decade of growth, this deep dive reveals that Satya Nadella's success was never about one single tactical move. It wasn't just the cloud pivot, and it wasn't just the shrewd acquisitions of LinkedIn and GitHub.
No, those were merely the outcomes of a more profound and, frankly, risky internal transformation. He recognized that for Microsoft to compete in the decentralized cloud era, they just couldn't afford the luxury of arrogance or internal competition. He took a stagnant giant, suffering from a 14-year identity crisis, and fundamentally injected humility, institutionalized a willingness to learn that growth mindset, and centered the entire strategy around empathy derived from his deepest personal experiences.
His tenure really demonstrates that corporate giants, regardless of their past dominance or their internal inertia, can completely reverse decades of decline by profoundly shifting their internal philosophy and by deciding that collaboration, even with fierce competitors, is the smarter route than isolation and trying to crush everyone. The ability to publicly admit error, like that pay raise incident, and then structurally bake that continual learning right into the corporate DNA, It proved to be revolutionary.
It truly is a case study proving that personal wisdom and empathy can be successfully scaled to drive strategy at the multi-trillion-dollar level. The empathy cultivated through managing the complexities of his son's life became the guiding principle for product accessibility and collaboration, which in turn unlocked the engineering required for the cloud to flourish.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought for you to carry forward this week. We've seen how Nadella credits his son's struggle with fundamentally altering Microsoft's corporate vision, driving billions in new value by prioritizing accessibility and empathy. So we have to ask ourselves, in your own field, what seemingly non-business, deeply personal experience, maybe one you view as a difficulty or a challenge, might actually be the biggest untapped driver for revolutionary innovation and necessary cultural change? Where does your personal empathy intersect with your professional output? Think about that one.
Indeed. We'll be back next time with another deep dive.
Welcome to The Debate. Our focus today is one of the most compelling stories of corporate transformation in, well, modern history. The incredible resurgence of Microsoft under CEO Satya Nadella since 2014. We're looking at a period that ended a staggering 14-year stretch of basically zero stock growth and resulted in the company's value increasing almost tenfold.
It is a truly dramatic pivot, and the source material gives us a lot to analyze. So the central question we really have to grapple with is what truly catalyzed this reversal? Was the primary engine Nadella's bold, outward-facing strategic and business decisions? I mean, the definitive shift to cloud and those massive market-shaping acquisitions? Or was it his deliberate, inward-facing cultural transformation, emphasizing values like empathy and a growth mindset?
My position is that the measurable, tangible success, that tenfold stock increase, is a direct consequence of clear, decisive strategic decisions, shrewd market alignment, and the successful allocation of massive capital. The financial transformation is the story here.
And I maintain that the strategy was merely the map. Without the fundamental necessary shift in corporate culture that Nadella orchestrated, moving away from internal hostility toward collaboration, those strategies you cite would have just failed to achieve escape velocity. They would have sunk under the weight of the previous era stagnation. Culture was the vehicle that made the map navigable.
Okay, let's start with the metrics. A near tenfold increase in market value isn't an abstract concept. It is a quantifiable financial result of superior market alignment. And Nadella's strategy, well, it wasn't a lucky guess. It was built on his deep expertise leading the cloud and enterprise group before 2014. He wasn't just implementing a strategy, he was the architect of that initial cloud pivot. We can see this in the server and tools business, where he oversaw revenue from $16.6 billion in 2011 to $20.3 billion by June 2013. That's before he even took the CEO role. He knew where the technological power was. Then, once he was appointed CEO, he immediately leveraged the company's capital to make these decisive strategic moves. I mean, we're talking about the $26.2 billion acquisition of LinkedIn in 2016, a pure play into professional networking, and the $7.5 billion purchase of GitHub. These are aggressive, calculated, multi-billion-dollar maneuvers. And his whole Microsoft loves Linux declaration and joining the Linux Foundation. That wasn't a cultural kindness, it was a pragmatic, strategic reversal required to compete. So for me, strategy, defined by capital and market position, drove the growth.
That's a strong case for the actions taken, but it really glosses over why those actions finally worked. Microsoft had been defined by this deep organizational sclerosis. I mean, 14 years of zero growth didn't happen because they lacked smart people. It happened because the internal culture was frankly toxic. It was defined by internal competition, infighting, and a rigid client services model that saw Windows and Office as these immutable cash cows. Nadella's genius was recognizing that he couldn't just execute a new strategy on a broken operating system. He explicitly orchestrated a cultural shift, emphasizing empathy, collaboration, and this growth mindset. And this wasn't just some HR fluff. This shift allowed the company to move from being a know-it-all to a learn-it-all organization. He codified it in the new mission statement, to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. The source material also makes it clear this was deeply personal for him. He publicly linked his experience as a father of a child with special needs to the development of corporate empathy, which directly led to prioritizing accessibility, a massive design and market differentiator. That culture provided the psychological safety needed to take the enormous risks you highlighted.
Let's hone in on the causality of the cloud pivot, because this is where the money really started flowing. You admit the revenue for cloud services was already moving significantly, from $16.6 billion to over $20 billion, while Nadella was still running that division. This shows that the technical strategy, Azure, was already mature in capturing market share, likely due to its strong enterprise roots. The market was ready for a second enterprise-friendly cloud solution, and Nadella was just the one positioned to deliver that. The initial lift was purely a technical and business strategy. It recognized a massive shift in corporate spending from on-premise servers to utility computing. I contend that the strategy was so compelling, the product was so good, the timing so perfect that even a modestly functional culture would have allowed it to succeed. The strategy provided the 27% annual growth rate, not the new mission statement.
I see that argument for the technical foundation, but it ignores the organizational physics required for that vision to become the behemoth it is today. Yes, the cloud division was hitting $20 billion, but that division was constantly fighting for resources against the established legacy divisions, Windows and Office, who were still generating massive predictable revenue. The old culture's reliance on P&L silos fostered these internal rivalries, often called the mini CEO syndrome, where divisions would actually sabotage each other. The growth mindset didn't just boost morale, it provided the executive mandate to break those silos. It allowed Nadella to tell the entire company, we are cannibalizing our successful past for a riskier future. That required immense internal trust and a cultural commitment to collaboration over competition. Without that cultural change, the whole company would never have fully committed.
Okay, let's shift to the acquisitions then. Specifically LinkedIn at $26.2 billion and GitHub at $7.5 billion. I simply cannot divorce the exponential stock growth from these massive capital plays. They represent pure, quantifiable market muscle strategy. LinkedIn was immediately leveraged to enhance Dynamics and Office products, expanding Microsoft's reach into data and professional social networking. These are definitive statements of market aggression against competitors like Google and Salesforce. We're discussing assets that immediately altered the value proposition here. The value proposition here is strategic capital allocation, not successful tea breaks and collaborative whiteboards. Nadella just demonstrated that he knew exactly how and where to deploy the company's cash to capture these high-value market segments.
Respectfully, focusing purely on the cost of the asset fundamentally misinterprets the complexity of successful M&A integration, particularly in tech. Microsoft, under previous regimes, had a notorious track record of acquiring successful companies and then either crushing their unique value or just alienating their user base. So why did the acquisition of GitHub, a platform built on the open source spirit that Microsoft had previously scorned, why did it work? It wasn't because of the check. It was because that earlier radical cultural reversal, Microsoft loves Linux, had signaled a genuine willingness to collaborate. The cultural capacity for collaboration is what convinced the millions of GitHub developers that they wouldn't be subsumed or shut down. The purchase price was the barrier to entry. The collaborative culture, well, that was the cost of retention and monetization. If those communities had scattered, that $7.5 billion would have been one of the biggest write-offs in tech history. The culture is what monetized this strategy. And let's discuss the role of empathy. Moving beyond just retention, you called it an internal optimization, but Nadella institutionalized it into product design. The link between his personal life caring for his son and the company's radical focus on accessibility wasn't just heartwarming, it became a core strategic pillar. This focus on accessibility, driven by empathy, became a genuine competitive advantage, especially in enterprise software where compliance and usability are paramount. His decision to write his book, hit refresh, and dedicate the profits to charity was a deliberate, top-down attempt to embed these values into the DNA of the corporation. That cultural bedrock dictates how the product teams even interpret the strategy you're talking about.
I fully agree that the success of GitHub's integration and the focus on accessibility are powerful examples of effective cultural optimization. I do. However, corporate performance remains inextricably linked to market factors, not philosophical alignment. The engine of the stock's massive movement, and let's remember, we're talking about market performance, is directly linked to the successful, quantifiable revenue from Azure and the growth of the acquired assets. The cultural change is the necessary means to retain the best talent and ensure smooth execution, but the strategy is what generates the capital. Nadella's own compensation reflects this market reality. His pay package rose significantly, reaching $79.1 million in 2024, directly tied to demonstrable business performance metrics, stock price, revenue targets on Azure. The market reward strategy that successfully translates into revenue. That's the ultimate driver here.
That's a compelling point on compensation, but let's consider how the culture handled the inevitable friction points. You can write any strategic memo you want, but the workforce looks to leadership behavior when the pressure is on. Think back to the 2014 pay raise controversy, where Nadella advised women not to ask for a raise but to trust the system. That was a critical, high-stakes moment where the old institutional culture surfaced publicly. By immediately and publicly correcting himself, admitting he was completely wrong in an email, Nadella validated the institutional change at the highest possible level. That act of humility and immediate correction built the internal trust necessary for employees to feel safe challenging the status quo, which is absolutely vital for a company trying to pivot its core business model. That flexibility wasn't strategic. It was cultural validation.
I would argue that immediate course correction, while essential for leadership credibility and morale, falls firmly into the category of necessary public relations. It's just ethical governance required of any modern successful CEO. While critical, that singular event did not fundamentally drive the reversal of 14 years of market stagnation. The financial revival was driven by the decision to jettison failing ventures like Nokia, the multi-billion-dollar realignment toward B2B cloud dominance, and the calculated opening of relationships with competitors. Those are the macro-strategic shifts that changed the trajectory of the company. That's where his institutional energy and capital were directed. It was about choosing the right market to dominate.
Conclusion.
So, at the end of the day, the evidence overwhelmingly suggests that the financial and market success of Microsoft was a direct result of aggressive strategic shifts, a clear, profitable pivot to cloud, and the massive disciplined capital allocation via acquisitions like LinkedIn and GitHub. These tangible, multi-billion-dollar actions directly correlated with the end of stagnation and that tenfold stock growth. The strategy provided the direction and the financial scale.
That's an interesting way to put it, though. I would frame it differently. I believe the success of those aggressive strategies was absolutely predicated on a pre-existing cultural foundation of empathy, humility, and collaboration. Without the growth mindset replacing the previous, internally competitive culture, the company would have just continued its cycle of stagnation. The organization would have lacked the political will, the safety, and the collaborative spirit to fully capitalize on the cloud opportunity or successfully integrate crucial acquisitions.
The material clearly demonstrates that Nadella's tenure required a rare combination, both decisive business actions and a profound internal reevaluation of the company's entire philosophy.
Ultimately, studying Microsoft's turnaround forces us to weigh the sequence of causality. Does leadership first fix the internal operating system, the culture, so that new strategies can achieve escape velocity? Or was the market alignment toward Azure just so powerful that the culture simply had to follow? It leaves us to consider whether strategy provides the map or if culture provides the vehicle for such massive corporate transformation. There is certainly much more to explore there.